It's live then, yeah?
Yes, we're live.
Okay, so there are no apologies for absence in this instance. Any declarations of interest? No, in that case, we'll proceed on that. Hello, Joseph. Good to see you. Hi. And then, is there any public participation, Fiona?
I haven't received any apologies, no.
No, any public participation?
No, and we haven't got any public participation.
All right. Minutes from the last meeting, any comments on them? Are you happy for us to proceed and sign them?
Yep. Great.
There was one point that was made in the last meeting about the £130 for maps for trees, I think, which you probably need to record, Fiona, for the minutes.
Yeah, so the
Patrick.
The £130 was for maps rather than for deeds.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got that, thank you.
So there'll be a need for more money. Is that what you're saying, Patrick?
Possibly, and that's the discussion. What we suggested in the last informal meeting was that I'd have a discussion with Kath and with Fiona about the efficacy, what we do and what we focus on.
Okay. All right. We'll leave that for the next meeting. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on then to the Henley Environmental Action Plan. Let me give a positioning for this, if I may. I was asked by Patrick and I think Rebecca at the time to join a group which comprises Patrick, Jackie, Rebecca, as well as a man called Mike Barry, who lives somewhere near Patrick, not certain which road, but he's been a resident of Henley for quite a time. But he actually was also the director of sustainability for Marks and Spencer's. He's left them, he's now a consultant. As well as Kate Aldridge, who you may remember is involved in XR, Extinction Rebellion, but now is much more focused on Greener Henley. And what the objective was how can we actually create an action plan that encompasses everyone in Henley, rather than just the Greener Henley and or Town Council. And the purpose of the approach is to encourage different stakeholder groups to actually participate and identify what actions are relevant for them. Now, I say that quite deliberately because take schools as an example. You might find that schools have a very different objective to business partnerships, but equally, within a school, you probably have different actions that are relevant for the senior management team, for parents, for staff, and certainly for children. But the intention is to try and get these groups together and identify what's relevant for them in terms of the environment. And actually, we spent time reviewing this with both Kath and Fiona, and then I sent it to Sheridan to get his comments, which were very positive, and actually highlighted the fact that what we need to encourage these groups to do is to be advocates as well as to share initiatives. So Sheridan gave an example of the council's bike to work scheme. Now, I've never seen any council officers on those bikes, but I'm sure they do at some stage. But what he was saying was, should we promote that to other members, other residents and groups in Henley? And also, should we actually perhaps share it? So not just promote it as an idea, but actually share the initiative. And that's something which I think is quite good, because it takes it from being not just talking about what actions each group has, but actually takes it forward to what actions, how can they support others? And our intention is to look for about 10 key stakeholder groups. There might be groups like the Business Partnership, there might be groups like the Rotary Club, Women's Institute and so forth, but actually communicate with them what our intentions are and ask them to identify what is relevant for them in terms of having an environmental action plan for Henley. And I suppose what we're really saying is we can't do everything in town council. We've got to engage with the local groups and get them to support. You've got two documents. One is a text document talking about the approach, and the other is a spreadsheet, a matrix, which tries to show what are things that are relevant in this instance to Henley Town Council, what's been worked on, and also what they support, but perhaps don't necessarily have an action. And there's a similar column for Greener Henley, and then there's something called Group A and Group B, and they could be anyone. There may be schools, as I said, it could be very varied. But what we're trying to do is get everyone involved and taking ownership of what they think is relevant. With that, I'm going to stop talking and actually perhaps ask Patrick and Jackie and perhaps Rebecca to add any things they think are relevant.
In that order?
You can do whichever order you want. Yeah.
I don't know, Rebecca, do you have something? I tend to just.
I haven't been involved in the meetings really, so I feel I can't really comment. I mean, I'm very pleased with this. I think it looks really good. I think it recognises that we certainly can't do everything ourselves, and there are lots of interested groups in the town. And that it's kind of, there are lots of different avenues to pursue, all of which it would be good if we had a lead organisation or an organisation that did some of it, but it all works towards one whole. So I think, I mean, I personally think it's a very good plan. I'm very pleased to see it. I think you've all done a really good amount of work with it. The issue is going to be getting people bought in and getting them to kind of actually do some of the things that will really make a difference. And part of that is going to be government action, of course, at national level. Some of it will be town council action, things they can do at local level, and some of it is going to be individuals. And so it's kind of hearts and minds kind of thing, I think, to be able to get people to really bought into it.
Jackie, any comments?
No comments as such. I think I have nothing to add to what's already been said. I'm more interested currently to start listening to comments from others who are seeing this emerge now to think further. Thanks.
Yeah, I am as well. Before we go on to that, let's just take Patrick. He's got his pencil up somewhere.
So just to, the last column is for individuals, and we have got some actions in place, campaigns to get people to change their energy supplier and do that sort of thing. So I think we need a lot more of it, but you're right, Rebecca, I think it's all about reaching out and winning hearts and minds. Something that we haven't talked about, and perhaps it's a bit early to do that, but we have considered is maintenance of this plan. And I think that it would be necessary to have a group to continue to look at the plan, to manage it, if you like, to identify what progress is being made, to change it if necessary, probably with a reporting structure, so reporting perhaps to this climate working group, and then through that planning and through to the town council. So that's something that we do need to have in place. But I think otherwise, as Jackie said, what would be really good is to get the opinions of people who have seen this for the first time.
Let me just take one point and build on that. The point that Sheridan made was he felt that it is important that the various committees should be engaged in this plan, that it shouldn't just be a climate emergency plan, but it was actually down to the committee members and the committee officers. So with that, the four councillors that are here, what I should say is that when we met with Kath and Fiona, they both thought that this should be run through the climate emergency working group in the first instance, but actually it has to be via other members of the council participating and having their actions. So any comments or critiques from, no? Okay. Ian, Kelly said no. Donna?
I was saying before, we have a Facebook, there is a Facebook site called Henley Recycle, and it's got nearly 3,000 members, and people recycle all their good stuff. And I think the lady that runs that is called Jo May, and she does a fantastic job of monitoring, and it's a great site to recycle stuff. And also charity shops we have in Henley are fantastic, you know, for buying clothes and donating your clothes. We have really good stuff, because I can vouch for that, because I've got a lot of stuff and I've also given them a lot of stuff, so it's great to yeah, it's like a circle. Yeah, so I'd just like to say that.
That's a good point, and that could well be one of the stakeholder groups to reach out to. I think it's quite relevant. Ken, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Right down the bottom of the plan, you've got responsibilities. Who put the numbers with the committees or working groups?
Well, I did to start with, and then I'm not certain what version you've got. I used shorthand name for the committees. Sheridan corrected me, so I think Fiona sent it out with a revised one, but I put the numbers against them. I might be wrong. I usually am.
So that would need to go to all those different groups and committees. That hasn't gone there. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Well, what is Group A and Group B?
Could be anyone. It could be retired building developers, or it could be business partnership. It could be
ex-mayors.
Ex-mayors, yes. There aren't enough of those, but yeah, there could be that. But actually, what we're saying is, it's anyone that has an interest in Henley and actually wants to have an action plan in that context. We haven't been prescriptive, but we are trying to identify the top 10 groups we should talk to.
Okay, thank you.
Ian?
It would be useful to make sure that the chairs of committees and the administrators have this list drawn to their attention. I mean, there are some which have already been allocated to groups. So, excuse me. So, finance, for example, has the council's disinvestment on fossil fuels and other undesirable commercial activities. There are one or two others as well, which I was looking through, which I think the committees could start to look at. I did think of some examples, but there's just too many there, and I've lost them now in my own mind. But the council isn't solely responsible, but the council has two functions. One is it's a symbolic leader, and if we're shown to be taking action, then others may feel that they want to copy us. But also there are real things that we can do. And I think that it was trees, was it? I just saw tree planting. Oh, no, that is in RNA. Increased tree cover on council-owned land, for example. Yeah, so that should go to RNA as well. So that was the example I picked out, not because it needs changing, but because all these activities should be considered by each of the main committees. To take a view as, is there something that this committee can do or can ask another group to do in improving our response to the climate emergency?
That was very much the comment or type of comment that Sheridan was making. Fiona, first of all, sorry.
Thank you, Tony. Yes, so the process that we might follow then is if this working group wanted to recommend the plan for approval to the planning committee, they would do that, and then I could pass that information on to all the other committees mentioned in the plan, and offer them support in taking that forward. So that would be the process that I would recommend, unless Kath thinks there's a better order to do it in. I think that would be a way forward.
Do you agree, Kath?
Yes, yeah, I think that's what we do. I think that was the plan. We need
Yeah.
a climate emergency working group to recommend this to planning committee, and then from there we can spread it out.
Okay. Well, just in terms of the other councillors, we are talking to some of you already. I sent an email, but actually we've got scheduled to meet with Lawrence Plant and Sarah Miller and also Michelle Thomas to cover some of their views. Donna, sorry, you had a hand up.
I was going to say, because Sarah was working on the refill of water bottles, and that's town and community, so that needs to go on number 6 instead of number 5.
Okay, well, that's what will happen. As I said, I tried to allocate it, failed obviously. But it is important that both, as Ian said, that both the council, the committee chairs, and also the council officers on each committee agree that it's their responsibility and agree what action they're going to take. So it's not just a case of talking nicely about we should have more trees, but actually having some plans about what the tree population we aim to have by 2025 and 2030 and so forth. So it's trying to get a bit more into the type of thing that Fiona and I have been talking about, which is actually getting an action plan within the council rather than just declaring a climate emergency. Any comments on that, Fiona?
That sounds right to me. I don't think I've got anything further to add.
Claudia, I haven't asked you if you had any comments. No? Okay. So are we happy to proceed and recommend to the planning committee that they should adopt this action plan and then subsequently presumably go to a full town council to agree its approach? Everyone in favour?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Tony. Should the feedback include the wish not only to follow the items that are in this action plan, but to identify further items which have perhaps been left off? And so it's not a limited list or a prescriptive list. It's a starter for 10, and all other or any other items which the committee or the chair or the administrator can think of, that they should feed them back to this group.
Agree entirely. Yeah, that actually reflects the comment I made to Kath and Fiona when we had the meeting weeks ago to review it, which I said I think the council tends to hide its light behind a bushel, and if it hasn't got a bushel, it tries to go and find one, so it's even more obscure. And I think there are lots of things the council are probably doing, but they don't actually think about it in this context. And they could be the leaders in the Henley community, or they could learn from other people.
I mean, perhaps chairs should be encouraged to have as an agenda item possible climate emergency actions for future consideration, or for input into the plan and feedback to this group.
Yeah,
it is now, and I think you could argue this is a token gesture, but reports that come to committees now do have a compulsory section on, and I can't remember what the title of that section is now, but it's something like climate change and biodiversity implications. I think that's the title, and that's a good thing. So each time you read a report, you're reminded, is this going to have negative implications, or are there positive implications that we're missing that we can take into consideration when considering this report and drawing up recommendations?
Yeah. Kelly, as your chair of RNA, would that be something that would be, I was going to say easy, but how easy it would be to implement? Sorry, you're on mute.
I don't think Kelly is mute.
Well,
Kelly.
can you?
He's talking, can't ever. Bless her.
We agree with what you're saying, Kelly. Okay. If you've got any thoughts, Kelly, perhaps you can put it in the chat, or alternatively pick it up later. Joseph, did you have any comments? No? Okay. Right. So in that case, we'll ask the planning committee to review this and include the type of comments you made. Kelly, you're back. Are you able to?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, great.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I just rejoined. I'm just really mindful of the fact that RNA is already a huge committee. So all of the outside spaces, it's the tree planting and everything you mentioned, and conservation and everything else that plays into it. That's already huge. But now RNA, the way that the town council committees have been restructured, we've now taken on all of the buildings as well. So I just want to be mindful of the workload that then brings on already. So it's not something, I know that we've, there's been talks of low-hanging fruit before, an example. That will be the case in some things, but we're still learning on RNA as well. There's been a huge restructure, and I think we just need to be mindful of that before we put on too much extra work on that particular committee. But in saying that, everyone on the committee seems very minded towards the kind of things that we're trying to achieve. So where there's a will, there's a way, I'm sure.
Okay. Patrick?
I would say that it may well be that RNA actually acts to help to coordinate, or else help to resource the work done by voluntary bodies, because there are other ways of doing it. It's not necessary that RNA has to do all of it, but what's helpful is for people like Greener Henley to have some degree of coordination, so that what we're doing is with the agreement, the council is aware, but is also can sanction what we're doing. So I think that's very important, and that's what I like about this plan, is that it can lay out so that you can see very quickly where there are voluntary bodies that are contributing towards something that town council committees are also giving a contribution towards.
Okay, thanks for that, Patrick. Well, with that, let's move on to the item 6, which is progress on projects. Rebecca, could you talk both about Henley Standard, but also about Greencore? Just quickly, for those people who are not aware of it, Greencore is the company that did the passive house building in Kingston Bagburies, and we introduced the manager director to both the planning committee, the chair of planning and Ken, as well as Kath and Fiona. And one thing that came out of that discussion was, wouldn't it be nice if we had a video which we used to show to the other developers? So would you like to start and just feedback on that, Rebecca, as well as Henley Standard?
So Patrick and myself and Jamie, who acted as the filmmaker, and Ian Pritchett, filmed the film about a week or so ago. Jamie has now put it together, so it's in the format of, we had a Zoom meeting, which he filmed, and it's now in the format of an interview, questions that Ian then answers, but also cut in with bits of film of the developments that he's done. I think it looks quite good. I'm quite pleased with it. No doubt if we had done it in a film studio or something, it maybe might have been a little bit better, or if we'd been able perhaps to film outside, but that's just not been possible at the moment. But I think it looks pretty good. So we've now got a film with Ian talking about embodied carbon, about what he's trying to do, about why his houses are particularly environmentally friendly, what makes them zero carbon. What I found particularly interesting was him talking about embodied carbon, this whole idea that when you build a building, before you build it, it's already got a lot of carbon embedded in it because of the carbon that has been emitted in making the concrete and the steel and everything else. And how going back to perhaps more natural materials actually makes a huge difference to embodied carbon, which lasts much longer than you might think. So he did a good job of answering all of the questions, and that's a film now that we can show and use and disseminate very widely. I don't know about, what did you think, Patrick?
Yeah, I'd agree. It's good because we got down some figures from him, and we've also got down the concept as well. And so it's something I would say, first of all, that we can distribute through the town council. So those that weren't able to get to the talk that he gave on Zoom can now, get a flavour of what it is and can start to ask questions of us. And we can then start to fill in some of the things that weren't answered in the video.
I made a comment there's a need for a summary slides, 1 or 2 slides at the end. I've left that with both Patrick and Rebecca to review and then go back to Jamie and ask him to add in. So perhaps you could action that if that's all right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Rebecca, what about social media and Henley Standard?
So had another Henley Standard column this week on travel, which gave me an opportunity to advertise the car scheme. I've also, hopefully the car club will start to take off, so it's a great idea. And thank you for that information, Fiona, about that. That was very helpful. I've also put up some few Facebook posts. I've been away last week, but I put up a Facebook post about environmentally friendly travel and also reusing some of the Henley Standard material that I'd written the last time about food on the basis that Naomi was very helpful and said you should always reuse content. And given that that was the last column that I wrote for Henley Standard, I thought that would be okay then to put it up on Facebook. Clearly, there's a lot more engagement on Facebook ads than you might get just putting it up on Facebook because obviously we don't have that many followers so far, and that's what matters. But given that Facebook ads are so cheap, then it has definitely been worthwhile putting some of them up. I'm getting some responses from people about things like solar roofs, car clubs, stuff like that. Sometimes it's just, well, why isn't the car for the car club an electric one? So we can have a discussion about that. Sometimes it's offering things or being interested in things so you can respond. What I'm finding is that even though I give them my personal email to respond to me further, they don't often do that. So I don't know if people perhaps just don't go back to a post and then don't see the response from me. But we're responding to them, the ones that we get, and these things, it tends to be a bit exponential. The more you respond, the more people you get, the more you have, because people have their own followers and so on. Donna, thank you very much for that tip about Henley Recycling Group. I didn't know about that group. I have just asked to join it. I think that would be an extremely helpful group for us to be members of. So I've just sent them a request just now asking if we can join it. So overall, I think, well, there's always plenty more we can do. I've been reading a book on holiday about sustainable living, which is quite interesting. I think I'll write a book review on that as a Facebook post. But overall, there's always more that could be done, but I think we're not doing too badly.
That's good. Before we go to Fiona to talk about the website, Patrick, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just to mention on Facebook, it's a problem that Greener Henley have found, is that when you ask people to email you, they don't. They repost, they answer it on Facebook. Yeah. And with the nature of Facebook, when you go to look at Facebook, it's disappeared. It's buried under a whole lot of history, and it is a huge problem with campaigns as to how you actually capture the communication in some way. And I'm not sure we've got the answer, but it'd be interesting to have a discussion with Lily and Julia as well to talk about how we do that, because at the moment we're losing a lot of contacts, I think.
Yeah, I think so. That's a good point, Patrick, because I'm finding you respond to the person on Facebook, but it could be they want to have a lot more information, or they say we've got a roof that might be suitable for solar panels, but then you respond and say, well, email me and we'll discuss it, and you just don't hear anything. So they probably do miss it under the whole history of posts. I agree. It is an issue.
Fiona, would you like to talk about the website? In this context, for the other members of the group, we had a meeting with Naomi and Fiona and Kath to talk about what we wanted in the new website. because we felt the current one just didn't do anything for us. So Fiona, how about an update?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's been recognised for a long time that the old website, doesn't really meet current needs. It's something that's evolved over a period of time and is not structured in a way that's easy to use. But Naomi has been working on delivering a new website, and the first version of that is in fact due to go live this afternoon in about half an hour's time, I think. So Naomi has all the feedback that we gave her at the meeting that we had. That won't all be addressed in the first version of the website, so you won't see all of those things there the first time around. But what you will see, I think you'll all agree, is something much more appealing and better structured than our old website. So it's something we can drive users to find information out about the climate emergency. And over the coming weeks and months, all of the other things that we've suggested around cycle routes and videos and the other information will be added to the climate emergency page or pages on that site. So I think that's making good progress now, and you'll see some improvement soon.
Okay. Would you like feedback from the group at this stage, or?
I think Naomi's already got so much information from the meeting that she had with us to implement, so it's probably best to let us get on and implement that, and we'll come back to you when we need more information, I would say, because
so that's a no.
No, thank you.
All right, thank you on that, and thanks Rebecca for your feedback. Okay, trees, Patrick.
Right, so there's quite a lot of different topics on trees. If I start off with tree management and tree strategy, been working with Fiona, or Fiona's been working with me, I should say, in reviewing the council has a management plan, which we're not reviewing. That's very much under R&A, but we're looking at a tree strategy which looks at, above the management plan, what should the objectives be? And this is very much in the early stages as a proposal, that looking at just replacement rate, and we don't feel that at the moment we necessarily have that in the existing management plan. So the strategy would be to at least meet the replacement rate on trees, that as they're cut down, that they are then, there's replanting to try to get an equivalence. And we're talking there about probably a ratio of 3 or 4 to 1 as a minimum, and ideally perhaps up to 10 to 1, where saplings are put in where a mature tree is cut down. Because a mature tree, certainly a 30-year-old tree, will be capturing carbon at its maximum rate. And you put in saplings and they've got 5 years before they really start making an impact. So there's a net loss. Each time you take out a semi-mature tree, there's a net loss that we need to try and make up. But that'll be all part of this strategy. So that's work that's going on in the background with between Fiona and me. Then going on to the more practical things, we've been running a garden trees campaign that's Greener Henley, but under it's again also part of the climate working group. And it's particularly important here that half the funding for this came from Henley and Bloom. And I think that, we've acknowledged that in the literature that we sent out. And I hope to present a report to Henley and Bloom on Friday. I think there's a meeting, just to say what's happened with the money that they gave us and what we're doing and what our plans are for the future. And 700 trees is a good number. Bear in mind that our target for the district is 50,000 trees a year. It's a start. We last year, just to sum up, we planted 1,000 trees, and that is a step on the way to 50,000. But we've still got some way to go. To be able to give away 700 garden trees has two benefits. First of all, you're engaging with the public and it's part of that outreach, and it allows us to have conversations, and it's leading on to possible planting of probably 3,000 to 5,000 trees next year. These are people that we've given trees to, and then they are then saying, yeah, I've got a lot of land here, I'd like to plant more. And so what we're trying to do is to scale that up. And that's, so one way to reach landowners is through campaigns like the Free Trees. So we very much want to run that again next year. The other way we're reaching landowners is through the mapping, which we referred to in the minutes of the last meeting. And that is getting maps of the parish. We've already got Henley, we've got Grays, Assendon, and Stoner, but we want to get a lot more, and that's what the £130 is for, is to buy those maps. And those maps show the opportunities, but then that's only the very first sort of step. Beyond that, we've got to find out land ownership. And when you find out that the land's owned in the Cayman Islands, you've then got to try and find out who actually is farming it. And that's probably the hardest step. And I think that's where we're looking at outreach, trying to contact people. And this is where we need help with a campaign to reach local landowners. And to that end, we've now talked to 2 people that have been associated in their professional careers with farming, and they have brought insights that are very helpful, but we need more of it. So there's a strand of work there that we need to really promote to get contact with local landowners, and they don't always want to talk to us. So we need to have a friendly introduction to get to talk to these people about the idea of rewilding, hedge planting, tree planting, just generally enhancing the biodiversity and also potentially sequestering carbon in the future. We talked about I talked about the strategy just now. Part of that strategy is to meet an objective. I penciled in an objective of 1,000 trees a year for the Henley parish, and about half of those would be Henley Town Council land. And so that's a very achievable target, but they've got to be the right trees and they've got to be in the right place. So whether it's the cemetery or the Fair Mile, or whether it's on Makins, or whether it's Freeman's Meadow, or whether it's around 40-acre field, you know, we've got to identify in the strategy, where are the appropriate places to plant those? Where do they bring the best value, both for climate change, for carbon, for air quality, but also as an amenity for people in the town. That means people taking walks and that sort of thing. It's all very well planting trees, but the next thing is maintenance. And we're working with Parks Department on maintaining, you know, volunteering to maintain the trees we've already planted. We've now got close on 1,000 trees that we've planted in and around Henley itself, and they need maintenance. So I'll be on to Parks about that for later this month and in June, watering, mulching and that sort of thing. And it's where Parks can't take on the work themselves, but they can be very helpful in terms of providing the resource, say the mulch, for instance, and taking stuff to site and that sort of thing. And then we provide the volunteer labour. That's last thing of all, which is we can't do it with the people we've got at the moment. Planting, say we want to plant 5,000 trees next year, we're going to need probably another 20 volunteers. So there's a challenge to recruit. And I think that's going to be part of the outreach. It's going to be part of reaching out. I mean, in a town of 12,000 people, we should be able to find 20 to do this work. And also things like scouts and cubs, schools, you name it. I think we've just got to be very open-minded about where we reach out to get people to do this work. So that's pretty much where we are at the moment with trees.
That's helpful, Patrick. Thank you. Before we open comments generally, Kelly, as you're probably within your chair of committee, you've probably got an overlap there. Are there any thoughts you've got on this?
No, it all makes sense, and I know that Parks have been working closely with Patrick for a while, and then they'll continue to do so. And we have something on the agenda every single cycle to do with trees, whether it's to do with the software, the management software that helps us manage them remotely, monitor them remotely, whether it's paying for the tree surveys, whether it's training for our staff to use the software to identify problems. It's constantly something that we're talking about on RNA anyway, so nothing further to add from what Patrick said.
Patrick?
I think it's actually raises a very important point that I'm aware, Fiona and I are aware that there's a lot of development within RNA on the management of trees, and I think it would be very helpful as we develop the strategy that we tie that in very closely, so that, for instance, how we use that software could probably be very helpful in guiding the strategy and how we develop the strategy. So I think that we need to get that a bit closer, to be honest.
Could that software be used by other people in the same way as we're talking about the advocacy and sharing initiatives in the Environmental Action Plan?
I have no idea about the software. I don't personally use it, so that's definitely a question I shall be needing to ask Becky about.
Okay, all right, fair point.
Yeah.
Fiona?
I've been advised that the software has some free fields that we can use to add other information. So if there is particular information we wanted to record to help the broader strategy, then the software can accommodate some additional information. So I've been talking to Judith and Becky about what that might be.
So it's not free fields in the context of agriculture?
No, just in the context of data.
There's no such thing as a free field around Henley. They're all being snapped up for development.
Okay. Any other comments on trees?
I guess just one, I mean, Patrick alluded to Cubs and Scouts and schools, but a number of the schools actually have a fair number of trees on site. I just wondered if those trees would be populated into the software as well, Kelly, potentially as a way of sort of work parks and schools potentially collaborating on looking after trees, because I can't imagine it's high up schools' priorities to look after their tree stock in a way that we maybe would like, but we probably can find lots of volunteers to do things if they know what they're meant to be doing.
Yeah, there's definitely already parks have a very collaborative approach with all of the schools. I know that they're definitely done work with Valley Road, Trinity, and Badgemore on all of their trees. So it's definitely something we'd need to investigate further. I couldn't say any which way without speaking to obviously the estates manager and the parks manager first, but there's always scope for the town council, park services to be working with our schools.
Patrick?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is Fiona and I need to work with Becky to find out what the scope of the existing tree, or the new tree software is, and to see whether we need to do some additional work to cover things like gardens. You know, Friar Park alone has probably got a few thousand trees in it. And, you know, so when we're looking at the total carbon sequestration of Henley Parish, then that would need to be included in the calculation. So we may well have to go beyond the software, or perhaps enhance the data set to cover these additional, which might well answer Joseph's question as well.
Okay. Any other comments before we proceed? No? Okay. Thanks on that, Patrick, and for your comments, Kelly. I appreciate that. Update on electric vehicle charging points. Perhaps you could like to comment, Fiona? So
work assessing the new bid for the Mill Meadows electric vehicle charging points is still ongoing, and we've had some new information today about a new OZEV scheme, which I'm assessing to make sure.
Can you explain what that is?
So this is a government scheme for supporting electric vehicle charging points in car parks like Mill Meadows. So there's a possibility of using grant money from that scheme to fund some of the work, and I want to understand what that might mean for us before I pass the information to the clerk, as has been agreed, before we can take that forward. So there's more work to do on that, but I hope to make progress on that in the next few weeks, and we've got a target to make a decision on that and start moving that forward by the end of June.
Okay, and what about the Transport Strategy Group and electric vehicle charging points, Patrick and Fiona?
Yeah.
Yes, so perhaps if I'll just start. So the Transport Strategy subgroup on electric vehicle charging points has had 2 meetings. I think they're making very good progress, scoping out their project brief and understanding what the key issues are that they need to address. The group's continuing to press Oxfordshire County Council for publication of their strategy, but that's not yet been made available to us, and obviously that will be important to us in the way things move forward. Councillor Lawrence Plant is chairing that group, and we're meeting about every 6 weeks to keep moving things forward, and we're also looking out for grant schemes that may be able to support the group in their work, such as conducting feasibility studies, for example.
Could we chase Oxford County Council? This strategy started back in January 2020, the earliest, and it would be out of date by the time we get it published. So it might be helpful. Patrick?
Yeah, on that point, I think I'm very glad that we got Lawrence engaged. He's got the youthful enthusiasm, which means that he's actually having success in getting through to OCC, and I think we will very soon get a copy of that strategy. So, I'm glad he's doing it and not me.
Got more patience probably, but that's not. You've got a lot on in your own right. Jackie, sorry.
I think there has been something, a reply to Lawrence Plant from OCC, so there might be something to report. I can't remember the details of the email now, Fiona. Do you remember?
So he had a conversation with Lizzie Bohan,
yeah,
the head, to update her, but I don't think they've been able to supply the strategies yet, so nothing substantial on that.
Okay. The other thing in terms of the electric vehicle charging points, we made an application via the Scottish and Southern Energy Networks to Ofgem for what would effectively be a grant to increase the electricity capacity within Henley. That went in probably about 3 weeks, perhaps 4 weeks ago. We haven't had anything back from SSEN. We'll be chasing them. We have already chased them, but we'll keep on the track there, okay? Because the electricity capacity is as important as having an infrastructure strategy. Otherwise, you have points that don't work. Let's go on then to the sites. Sorry, any other questions on electric vehicle charging points? No? Okay. Let's go to just a quick update on the site for solar panels. What we identified was that a lot of the communications we had with building owners, users, had fallen into abeyance because of the pandemic. So we're going to be starting to write to them again with myself and Claudia and also Rebecca as the contact points. We'll be chasing them. There are a few sites that have just gone, taking the opportunity of the lockdown to do a total refurbishment. So we've got to fit into their timescale. But if we don't attempt to get face-to-face contact, the Zoom contact or whatever just doesn't work satisfactorily. So we'll keep you up to date on that. And the other one is the decarbonisation of the Henley Town Council's own properties. This is an application put in by Sheridan for a grant from the Rural Community Energy Fund. Several of us fed back into the tender applications for him, and also offered to help him when he gets that feasibility study up and running, to help deal with any questions and so forth. I spoke to him last week, and he's waiting. He thinks it's going to probably be about another 2 to 3 months before we have a feedback from our CEF. But that is something which will be worthwhile, because it'll be involve things like air source heat pumps, probably, and perhaps solar panels on the roofs of some of the council buildings to try and reduce the carbon in the energy usage. So that covers the progress on projects. Neighbourhood plan update. Where should we start, Patrick?
Yeah. I
I
think
would say, let's go back a bit. I know that some of us, including Ken, has been asked by Jody to comment on some of the policies, and particularly the evidence. I've done the bits I was allocated. I found it very difficult to do it. And I suspect my responses are totally inadequate, but I've done my best. So with that, Patrick, why don't you tell us how we're doing?
Yeah, I think basically the process was that we drafted a whole series of policies, which were then sent to AECOM, who tore them to pieces and told us how inadequate they were, and where we needed to add evidence, where we should just drop them, and so on and so on. So what that's done is to give us a very significant workload in order to try and identify evidence to support the policies that we want to put in place. And I have to say that Claudia really drew the short straw there with the building standards. I think my suggestion has been that we actually need to actually buy in some resource, if we can't get free support for it, to make sure that we have got properly evidenced policies. Because the danger is, if we don't do that, these policies will be struck out. And it's very easy for South Oxfordshire District Council and for the inspector to just put red ink across the sheet and to just delete effectively all the work we've done. That's really where we are, is trying to collect evidence to support the policies that we want to put in place. As I said, particularly for the building ones and for energy, I'm hoping that we can go back to the Centre for Sustainable Energy to get some consultancy, either ideally free, but otherwise we may have to pay for it, in order to reinforce and make sure that we get our policies through. I would also say that we don't have a receptive and willing audience with SODC on this, that it seems as though their main objective is to put as little as possible in the way of housing development. They've got a target of 33,000 homes, I think it is, to build under the new local plan, and they want to be able to spread those around liberally across the district, and they don't want nasty things like environmental policies to get in their way. So we've got an uphill struggle, and I wouldn't underestimate the work that we've got to do on that.
Ken, you're both chair of the neighbourhood plan group and also SODC councillor, as is Kelly.
Yeah, I would be a bit more positive of that, actually, because I think we're looking for policies for Henley and Harpston. We're not looking for policies for SODC, the whole area of the district. I was reading the parking one the other day, and it's exactly what I want. Is to get cars off the street. Well, there's no room on the streets any longer. And my view is, we are looking for policies for Henley and Harpston. And I think if we stick to those policies, and obviously use the district council policies as well, we've already sent a lot of these to Ricardo Rios, and he's come back and he's marked us out of 10, not very highly, but we've kind of changed them once. And I would be a lot more positive, Patrick. and you know what we think is a good policy and goes through the neighbourhood plan. My view is it's a good policy, and if SODC and A and other are going to talk about you know, making changes to them again, I think they've got to come back with really good reasons for us to make changes. And I think it's then up, if they do ask that, it's then up to us to go back to them and ask for the reasons why. So no, I'm a bit more positive than you, Patrick. I think it's up to us to say what we want for Henley and Harpston, rather than an inspector and SODC to come back and give a different view. That's my view.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Fiona, Patrick, before you say anything, Fiona?
And I must say, I share Ken's optimism about the ambition of our policies and what we're trying to achieve with them. But sadly, it is the case that what we might think good, if the planning inspector judges them not to be effective, they will be struck out, because if they don't comply with the structure of planning rules, then you know they won't be allowed. However good we think they are, then you know they just won't be allowed. So it is crucial, if we want things to go through, that we supply the evidence needed to justify those things. We can, I mean, the person who best understands how to present evidence for us is Jodie. So do please, if you feel stuck with your,
exactly.
you know, go back to Jodie, and she will guide you. She can't do all of this herself, simply because you know there's 164 pages of whatever of evidence and quite a large number of policies. So it's just too much work for her to complete, but she knows how to do it. So if you're feeling a little bit stuck, do go back to Jodie and seek advice, and I'm sure she will help guide you. What
is the exact timescale, given the fact that Ken says be positive and you're saying be careful? What's the timescale you need it for? Because I thought it was due for the 20th of May.
I think she asked for our first draft responses by Monday, the 10th.
10th of May.
Yeah.
Right.
The 10th of May.
And how likely is that going to be the case? Patrick?
I'd suggest that we get something to her for the 10th of May, and if there are gaps, there are things where we say we need additional resource, as I think Claudia will, that we identify that at the time and say, we can't find this evidence ourselves, but if we got Dan Stone in, he would be able to find it for us straight away, you know, and so we can put that in as a sort of a marker, so that we don't just delete things, but we do is identify that. And by picking up on what Ken said, if I can, Tony, that's a good point, is if we put stuff in and SODC try and delete it, then Simon Burkitt, who is the chap who's advised us on air quality and who actually was on the we did a OMPA did a webinar on this, and Ricardo Rios was saying how we absolutely can't go beyond SODC policies, and Simon Burkitt sent me an email afterwards and said, yes, you can.
Yeah.
If Ricardo deletes stuff saying we can't go beyond SODC policies, he says tell him, because he's got a firm of solicitors who can get onto it. So you know, if we want to, we can argue the case, which is your point, Ken. You know, let's not get ridden roughshod over by SODC. When it comes to the inspector or examiner, I think we're stuck.
Yeah.
Because what he says goes, and we can't really argue with him. But we certainly can argue with what SODC tell us.
Rebecca?
If we put in a policy that's legally sound, that we've already had legal opinion on what grounds can the planning inspector strike it out?
Legal grounds that'll then be like, you've got two lawyers arguing with each other. And that's when you have to take it to review. And I don't think we're in a position where we can fund that. So in the end, if the examiner chooses to go against it, it's actually where we can select the examiner. That a lot of people don't know that, but you can actually put in a short list of examiners that you want. So what we can do, SODC have got favoured examiners who go their way, and that's who they'll normally hand it to. But there are examiners who've got more environmental credentials, if you like, and I think they're the ones that we want to get to review it.
It would seem to me that having a legal opinion on it, even before you put it in, would be a good idea. Just simply because then you know that at least these are legally sound.
Well, that's what we've done with ACOM. We've already, that's what they're doing. They're bringing that legal side to bear. So we got to take their advice. But a lot of it comes down to, it's like when you go before a judge, if you can pick the judge you go before, then it can have quite a profound effect on the outcome of your case. So I think that's really where we want to go.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Just need to pick our judge.
Yes. Only if you, yeah.
Okay. That's been helpful. What it does mean is that if it's got to be in by the 10th of May for Jodie, any of you that have got a responsibility to provide some input, you need to get moving if you haven't done so already. Sorry, Claudia?
Yeah, I spoke to Jodie just earlier and she gave me a few pointers, so I will, get on with it from tomorrow. And it is mainly the evidence, and she actually used your work as an example, Tony, of what she would like to see. So.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well. I shan't make a comment on that.
So it was helpful. And also, she has also separately emailed Dan Stone already. He hasn't responded, but I think, with her contacting him as well, he'll be aware of some things potentially coming his way.
Right.
So.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So presumably we have to wait and see and then hope things go well from about the 20th onwards. All right. Any other points on neighbourhood plan, or is that done? No.
Fine.
I think we've covered everything on the agenda, apart from the date of the next meeting. We've lost Jackie, we've lost Joseph, because they had both 2 o'clock meetings. But thank you very much for all of you participating, and thanks for your comments. Fiona, date of next meeting.
I wanted to suggest the 29th of June at 1 p.m.
Is that okay for everyone? That's a Tuesday? Yeah. In that case, let's go with it. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Leave you to it.
Actually, just I think the question is where we're going to be meeting next as well, because I think the town council may well dictate to that. I had a fellow called David Rouet on this morning from the district council, and obviously because of the court case last week that was lost, it's quite possible that the meetings may have to go back to the town hall or anywhere else that's got a bigger room to hold a meeting. So that will obviously need to be considered, but that'd be a town council decision, I would imagine, Tony.
Yeah, okay, there's no problem. Just let us know. It'd be nice to see you in the body, in the flesh, so to speak.
What, me personally, or?
Yeah, you can. Everyone likes to see it.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Right.
Cheerio.